Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the raw and uncut version of the SellOut Show. I think we had a lot of fun, but I think we laid down some really cool stuff today. So Sean, tell us what we're going to talk about today.
Well, Dianna, you brought up this subject of tracking and what magic happens when you start tracking your performance. If you think about it, like Dianna always says, sellers, you salespeople are the extreme athletes of the business world. So you have to track your stuff. And so she's got 3 ways that she's going to drop on your plate of how you do that so that you can be the Magic Jordan or the LeBron James or
Magic Johnson, Magic Jordan, whatever.
Michael Jordan. Oh, shit.
You're going to have a lot of fun. So here we go.
Watch this raw and uncut version.
Should we just start with the welcome?
Yes, let's start with the welcome.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the SellOut Show, where we are always sold out. I am Dianna Guerin, the irreverent sales girl, and my mission is to bring a dash of dignity to the art of selling.
Hello, Dianna.
Hello, Sean.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Carroll Sandy. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of the Selling Agency, where we coach humans how to sell to other humans. Because if you sell like a vampire, just waiting to get your fangs in your customers, you will be replaced by someone who doesn't suck.
Oh, that's so good. I have fangs.
Oh, I didn't think about that. I read some vampire books on vacation.
Oh, really? Were they the teenage ones or?
No. These definitely have a lot of adult behavior in them.
Mm.
I'm just not allowed. I brought business books, and this happened last year. My sister was on vacation with her. She's like, "You just stop with the business books. Stop with them." So, but which was to her point. I just did need to relax and apparently go to some vampire actions. She had some books I borrowed, so it was entertaining.
That is so good. That is so good. A little beach trashy reading is always very good.
Exactly. Yes. All right. So you have an interesting topic today.
Well, first I want to introduce you to my new mug that my very good friend Natalie Bale gave me. So
I love that.
All about the Labradors. Anyway, yes.
Such a clean design, and it looks like it holds an ample amount of coffee.
It's not small. It's big.
It's small.
All right, no. So what do you want to talk about today? What are we going to talk about today?
You had a topic which I love. I think that we can't say enough here for you, boots on the ground, phone in the hand salespeople. We can't do enough about mindset and our attitude and where we are with that. Oh, crap. I just froze up.
Are we better?
I think we're better now.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
It just was a little glip there. Well, yeah. Okay, so go ahead. So we can't say enough about mindset. Go ahead.
Yes. So and attitude and how we spend our time and look in the kind of talk we have with ourselves, like the real talk, right? So you brought this up today.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is really important for salespeople to do is, because we can really get trapped in our heads thinking that something's happening that's not actually happening. And that is, I really believe that true sales professionals track the things that they do that are important. And, some of us have tools that our companies provide for us that allows us to kind of track or report on things. And all that's really good if you're actually using it. But I wanted to kind of talk about the 3 things that tracking makes you better at and the power that it gives you as a salesperson if you're tracking the important, and you'll hear the term KPIs sometimes out there, which took me a long time to kind of figure out what a KPI was because I didn't want to ask, but it's called a key performance indicator, which is something that you determine for yourself, like what are the things that you do that move the ball forward in your sales. And when you start to track, you start to get really interesting insights that maybe you hadn't had before. So I'm just curious, Sean, what have you done in your illustrious sales career to track in reality what's happening as opposed to kind of what you think might be happening?
Well, I think what I want to say is that we lie to ourselves. Man, we are so good at lying to ourselves and
bless our hearts.
Lies. Yes, bless our hearts. That I realized one time I had this really tough conversation with my boss because things were not going well. I was okay, but I wasn't seeing the continued trajectory of growth that I had. And, he's like, well, let's take a look at your numbers. And by numbers, he really meant actions and activity. And I felt like I was doing the right things. But when we really got down to saying, well, how many calls did you actually make? And what were you bringing to the table? And, it was just not the right activity, and it wasn't the right thoughtful, qualified action that I was doing. But I've been lying to myself and telling myself that I really had been. So I got in the habit of every week really taking a look at, if I did something, what result did that produce? Like, I would look at my week. If I had a meeting with someone, was it just a fluff meeting, or what really came out of it? And so I really started measuring the outcomes of my actions. And so to take out the fluffy bullshit in my week, and that helped tremendously. And that has evolved eventually to where I know I preach this all the time. Preach is that if it's worth doing, it's worth putting on your calendar, and I don't ignore it. If it goes in my calendar, it means I'm going to do it because it was worthy of getting on my calendar. So that the whole one conversation with my sales director really led to a practice and a habit that I still keep today, which is to take a look during the week of the actions that I had. What were the outcomes? And if you do it a week at a time, you can even do it every day. I don't know if I'm not meeting with, 20, I don't have 20 meetings a day or making 20 phone calls. It's a different type of business now. But I've gotten the habit of really going back and assessing what was the outcome from the action. And I have a story to go along with this. So
yeah.
I can't remember what book this was in, because we do read a lot of books around here, but they told a story about measurement. It might have been Traction by Gino Wickman. I think that's the story's in this book. And so he talked about when Rudy Giuliani took over as mayor of New York City, the crime rate was like up, had been continually growing. And he very quickly got them on board with a crime tracking software. So what this did was they were historically looking at results saying, okay, here's our quarterly crime report. This happened, this happened, this happened. This is a hotbed of activity or whatever. And quarterly reports come out like a month after the quarter ends. So they were looking at this historical data, and by the time that period is over, crime has moved on to someplace else. But by looking at like a daily crime tracker, they were able to say, okay, for 2 days in a row, we've had break-ins in this neighborhood. We can deploy resources in here. So they were able to measure the, take measurements and draw conclusions from the data closest to the source of incident, and be able to respond quicker, which was able to produce different results. And ultimately, crime was able to go down because they were able to deploy resources. So if you can track things closer to the area of instance or the point of origin or whatever, you're able to make smaller and more calculated changes sooner, instead of, oh, it's the end of the quarter, didn't make my number, oops.
Right. Wonder what happened. What happened?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my story.
Yeah, well, I think that's great. And, the thing, what you brought up at the very end is, that idea of this, like, looking back and what happened. And what's really interesting is if we're not tracking things, then we start to actually look somewhere else to see what happened.
Yeah.
Well, the competition got $20 million in funding, or, this anecdotal deal fell through because they had a reorg, or, you start to look outside of yourself if you're not tracking. But when you're tracking, you can say things like, oh, you know what? I didn't do my 20, meetings this month, every month, like I promised that I would, or I didn't do as many demos as I thought that I did, and so what happens with that is it's always harder to look at yourself. So I think tracking takes a lot of courage, right? Because you're actually like dealing with what's so, but you can't control if your competitor got $20 million extra in funding. You can't control if there was a reorg, but you can control your own actions. Mm-hmm. And when you start to realize that if you can actually move the things that you're tracking, then, the mystery, it gets demystified. And maybe you have to own up for that you weren't doing everything that you should have been. But at least that gives you power going forward. So I think that's the one thing that tracking does for you is gives you personal power.
Yes. And that's applicable for everything. If like diet and exercise and stuff, say, well, I didn't lose 10 pounds this month. Oops, versus, okay, on a weekly basis, here's what I ate. Here's, how many calories in, how many calories out. It's really no different. It's being accountable, and not believing those lies that you tell yourself because you know that you're not doing the right things, but you don't know what those things are because you're not tracking it.
Yeah, you will lie to yourself. The second thing that I found that was super awesome in the last real job that I had, now it's before my business.
You don't have a real job now. You have an imaginary job.
Well, now I have a business. No, I don't know. Last time I was being paid by an employer to do sales for them. I had such a long sales cycle, Sean. It was like, I don't know, 12 or 18 months sales cycle. I mean, it was super long sales cycle. And it wasn't just me. It was a sales cycle. So what I started to do was I started to track my numbers weekly. I had a coach who was brilliant. And we just picked 9 things to track. One was how many cold calls was I doing? One was how many warm calls was I doing? How many demonstrations was I doing? How many in-person meetings? Like, we just came up with all these 9 things that we thought might be useful to track, right? And then we started tracking them. And it only took me 2 quarters to get to these numbers. But what I started to see was there were only 3 numbers that made a difference.
Oh, okay. What were they?
Cold calls. In this case, it's going to be different for everybody, right? Everybody's situation is totally different. But what I saw was that every single week that I did a certain amount of cold calls, I can't remember how many it was, but a certain amount of cold calls and a certain amount of demonstrations, I was 80% likely in those weeks to close a deal that week. Now, I don't know how this all works because I'm not a mathematician and I don't understand like how the universe manages all these machinery, but it was reliable, and it was reliable over 3 years. Like, I was tracking this. It was reliable over 3 years. Every time I hit my cold calls, didn't matter. I mean, everything matters, right? Warm calls, in-person meetings, but those were the numbers that were indicators. So I guess what I'm pointing to is this was a surprise for me because obviously the cold call and the demonstration that I did didn't lead to the sale that I made that week, right? Because I've got a 12 to 18 month sales cycle. But it was reliable. So I just made sure that no matter what happened any given week, that I pushed myself to get that many demonstrations and that many cold calls. And then 80% of the time I would close a deal that week. And it was magical. So that's what starts to happen. That's the second thing that starts to happen when you start to track all sorts of things is you start to see correlations that allow you to focus on, what's important to you. Have you ever had some kind of insight like that from what you've been tracking?
Not necessarily from that external indicator. I'll give you an example. In my business, if I track during pre-qualification process with someone, if XYZ components, I can be sure that they're going to sign up with me. So that's not necessarily what I was doing. But if I was actually tracking and sticking to my pre-qualification criteria, I could definitely tell you I'm going to close this business.
Oh, that's so if you check this box and this box and this, so how many qualifiers did you have to sort of test before you found the right ones?
I have, I think, 4 key qualifiers of a group of 7. There's 4 key qualifiers that I found. And this has been, probably took me a good 2.5 to really close to 3 years in my consulting business to figure out what those were. But again, it was after the fact going, what I missed here? Why was this not happening? Whatever. And then it was really kind of sorting those things. So now I live and die by that. Like, one of them is understanding, have they tried other solutions? If I'm the first solution they try, chances are they're not enough pain. And then we've gotten to the proposal stage, they balked at the fee. So if they've spent money on trying a different solution before, that's a great indicator because it didn't work and they're coming back, or they're coming to me, that they're going to sign.
That is really good. And there's a little piece of data in there that I think is really important for people to catch is top performers tend to stick with where they are. Do you know what I mean? So it took me a good 2 years to really validate the data, right, that I was tracking. But this is why it's so important. In the Solid Six Blueprint, we talk about you've got to have the right location, and that includes the right company, the right boss, the right culture, because it takes sticking with it for a while and to become a really top performer. And I think top performers are usually the ones who are at their companies a lot longer than, kind of getting on the merry-go-round of moving from company to company.
Yeah, it's a long game now. I mean, it is a long game. I think, I don't know, the data says that like the average buying journey is 22% longer than it was just 5 years ago. And that's in Market Bridge from probably 2014 or 2015. So because as a buyer, I can do my own research, and, you've got more people involved, like we're crowdsourcing other people's experiences. And sales is a long game. That's where that grit and persistence personality trait comes in. You have to have it. And that you have to have that to track your stuff too.
You really do. And you can't miss a week. You can't drop the ball and miss a week. You gotta now if you do miss a week, just get back on your horse and keep going. But
we have a saying in my fitness group: never miss a Monday. No matter how shitty you did over the weekend, you dropped the ball, or you boosted up, or you sat on the couch and just binge Netflix, or you didn't feel good. Never miss a Monday.
Yep. Never miss a Monday. And for me, it's never miss my at least 100, right? I am not leaving my desk on Friday until I have made my 100 quality outreach to my territories. It makes, I have to tell you something really cool.
Yes.
Today, when the deposit hits my account, I will have passed my, it's only a month early, but I will have passed my goal for my revenue goal for the whole year.
Yay!
So almost a month early, but it was a real stretch goal. Do you know what I mean? Like it was a stretch goal for the last 6 months. And I was like, I don't know how we're ever going to do this, but we're going for it. And my assistant and I have these accountabilities that we do. And I knew that one of the things that was going to have me perform was if I hit that 100 plus every week. And I was at 54. I was reliable for 54 when we started, and I held my feet to the fire the entire 6 months. And I'm going to, as soon as this deposit hits, which should happen today, I just talked to the person today, I will be 14% ahead of my goal that I set for myself for revenue this year. I know it's such a good feeling, but you don't get to know that stuff unless you track and hold your feet to the fire.
Yep.
So that's the third thing is, you get results when you, no matter what it takes, you have to do the thing that you said that you were going to do. And then after the 6 months, I'll look back and I'll evaluate, is that the key performance indicator that I'm going to take into the next quarter or not? But there's a, what's it called? There's a real temptation to pivot. That's the one thing. When you set aside a goal in a period of time, there was a temptation to pivot in November and be like, well, maybe I should start paying attention to this thing over here. And it's like, no. That will throw you off track so fast. So.
Oh, it takes such discipline to go the distance.
Yeah.
It does. I've never been a really terribly disciplined person because I like challenges. I like, learning new things and the fresh relationships and stuff like that. So discipline was something I struggled with and really wanted to adopt this year for myself and in different facets of my life. So you have to have that discipline to set it, do it, track it, and keep the path. Congratulations. That's pretty impressive.
Well, and you too. But look at what happened this year, right? So you have these different facets, but you didn't take on a lot of things that you were tracking.
Right.
So the difference was that I didn't take on, I'm going to, have my rescue time be at 98% and my, 100 calls and la. I just picked one. Everything else falls in line, but don't fool yourself into taking on a lot of things in an area that you're trying to move. Just pick one thing and have that be the one that you're going to nail no matter what, because anybody has enough discipline to nail one thing.
Yes. Oh, so true. Yeah. So how do you think people need to figure out what that one thing is that they should do?
I kind of think maybe it doesn't even really super matter. how did you do it? How did you pick like what was going to be the one, you know, because I mean, if you're going to be on the matter of like improving your health or losing weight, you know, there are a lot of things you could do. You could be like, I'm going to do my calorie tracker every day, or I'm going to check in with my accountability partner every day, or I'm going to walk. You know, I've never really seen people walk the 10,000 steps and have that impact their weight, but that's my own thing. How did you pick your one thing?
Well, it was Jim Cathcart, the Self-Motivation Handbook. I read that, and that story about keeping that promise to himself to go touch the curb, it just sort of lit a fire in me. And I've told the story before, but I'll just do a short version. So he decided that he, you know, was like in his 30s, maybe he wanted to become a runner. I want to become a jogger. All his friends were getting healthy, and he thought, I'm going to do that too. But he hated running. He hated jogging. He's like, this sucks. I felt the same way, like shin splints. It was terrible. It's boring.
Right.
But he really wanted to do it, but he kept making excuses. He's like, oh, it's cold outside. Oh, I don't feel good. I don't have enough time, whatever. So then he's like, no. I really want to do this. So I'm going to create an accountability system to myself. He said, every morning I'm going to get up, I'm going to get dressed, put on my tennis shoes, and you just have to go touch the curb. Jim, you just have to go outside and touch the curb, and then you can go back to bed. You can go do whatever. And so that was the promise, not I'm going to run a marathon this year, or I'm going to run 3 miles 6 days a week, or whatever. It was, I'm just going to go touch the curb. That was the promise. He set a smaller promise, which once you get out there, you're like, well, I'm here. I might as well keep on going. And that was really, I was like, I could do that. So for me, it wasn't necessarily touch the curb. It was some facet of that. I was like, I'm going to go get on the treadmill. I don't care if you're so tired. Like I have a desk treadmill. That's how this all started. I'm going to put my head down on the desk and sleepwalk. I don't care, but you're going to get up and you're going to do that. You're not going to. And so I moved my alarm across the room, and that was it. It was just get dressed. In order to do that, I had to get my clothes out ahead of time. So there were things that, to keep this one promise to myself and stay disciplined there, that I backed it up to do. And that was like, you know, I was getting up at 6:30 to do that. Well, now I get up at 5. So it's been an evolution, and
right.
It all starts with that one thing. So, you know, in your sales career, is it what one small thing, what one discipline can you create that could create some of those, you know, secondary accountability things? But is it, you know, I'm going to get to work I'm going to get to work a half hour earlier every day.
Right.
So that whether it's because you've got a habit of like, you just love to sit and enjoy your coffee and read the email, or it's, I'm not going to check email before 10 o'clock. I'm going to make 10 calls. Just one thing could change all that, right?
Well, see, I love what you said, because here's the thing is, if every morning all you'd done was gotten up and slept walked on your treadmill, yeah. It wouldn't have gotten you the result, right? Mm-hmm. But the activity of doing something that wasn't like overwhelming, it led to the activities that make your promise come true. Mm-hmm. And it just gives yourself the ability to like that head trash that's saying, oh, it's too big today. Like if you promise yourself that you're going to run 10 miles every day as a start, you know, you're screwed from the beginning. Yeah. But if you promise yourself you're going to put on your shoes, you're going to touch the curb, and if you don't feel like running, you're not going to run, that's where the magic happens. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it could be just, I promise that, I'm going to make 10 more dials a week. Like instead of emails, I'm going to pick up the phone 10 more times this week, and I'm going to track it. When you start there, it changes everything. So take something that's not hard. I mean, for some people, I can imagine that it would be really challenging to say, I'm going to track 100. And I don't mean just smile and dial, just anybody, you know, I mean somebody that I'm calling for a reason who could buy with a quality voicemail, or that's what I mean by 100. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that was a little bit of a stretch. So, but don't start at 100 if that's not where you are. Do you know?
Right.
Start where you are.
Because I will tell you, and maybe tell me if you feel the same way, like having achieved that goal, I feel like I can do anything now. I mean, seriously, kind of anything. It might be a little late for me to be like a Russian gymnast, but I mean, I was saying, you know, I could still be maybe a gymnast if I wanted to. Maybe
well,
not.
sure. And the really great thing about doing things when you're older is that people are like, wow, that's so cool. You know, like there's nobody else in your category.
Yeah. Well, like,
So it sounds much more likely that you'll be the champion. Just saying.
Exactly. Well, I told, my husband and I were talking about goals on our vacation, and I said, I want to be a hitter. Like, we're played tons of beach volleyball, and we played in a volleyball league indoor this past summer, and I just have not gotten off the ground a lot in the past 25 years or 20 years maybe. So I need to relearn how to do that. I want to hit the ball. I want people to set me the ball, and I want to smash it in people's faces.
Smash it.
Really smash it.
Smash it.
So,
all right, so let's recap. So the things that you get from tracking, the first one is you get personal power, which gives you personal pride. The second thing is you get insights that lead you to be more effective. So you found that out of your 7 qualifying questions, your 4 were the ones that moved the needle. I found my 3 KPIs out of 9. And the third thing is that you start to meet and exceed your goals by just taking one little tiny thing on that builds a system for you.
Yes.
3 things. That's why to track.
Tracking. It's like going from, watching my son play baseball. He's gone from T-ball to Little League, and, as they start moving up, then they'll actually start tracking. They'll start tracking errors and, RBIs and, your batting averages and stuff like that. Because when you can start doing those things, you can say, well, here's my performance as a part of the whole. And that is getting serious about your performance, and looking at, instead of just the whole, it's what am I doing incrementally that affects the whole big picture. Tracking.
Oh, it's so perfect, because we always talk about how the salespeople are the extreme athletes of the organization, and extreme athletes keep their stats.
They have coaches and trainers and nutritionists and people, track their stats. Yeah. Oh, I love it. So
I love it.
Let us know if there's a different metric. I'm really curious to know this. If you're watching this, if there's a different metric that you track that is like, if I track this, or I start tracking this, and then boom, I know that if I do this, then I'll get results. I'm curious to see if there's some really different types of metrics out there, other than like the actions, meetings, activities, calls. Yeah. Let us know.
Put your comments below.
Subscribe, yo. Like, just do it. Tell your friends.
Bless your hearts.
Don't leave us hanging.
Subscribe.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up then.
Okay. So I will kick us out by saying, stop hoping.
And start selling.
That's right. Bye.